Peace in YouTube. This is Greg from GregsTutoringNYC at gmail.com here. As you guys may know, I'm a tutor in New York City, and I tutor for a lot of the standardized tests, including the SHSAT. So this morning I'm going to do a couple of problems, not all of them, and maybe we'll do this as a series. We're going to talk about the grade 9 SHSAT math problems. There's a lot of kids who are taking the grade 9 SHSAT, and especially with the pandemic, getting more queries than ever about it. So what I'm going to do now is, I only have a few minutes, so I'm going to probably do the first 3 questions here from the 2020 student handbook, and then we'll just keep building up as the weeks go on or the days go on or whatever. Anybody wants to join in, fine, cool. I'm just going to keep going here, and as we get a swing going, a groove going, we can start answering questions. Let me just make sure I'm live. I seem to be, yes, I believe so. You should be seeing the problems on your screen at the moment. This is from the most recent student handbook in 2020. I'm not sure what page I'm on. Let's see here. I'm further along in the handbook. So on page 252 is some of the grade 9 problems. So let's just jump right into this. So number 1, the side length of a certain square microchip expressed in scientific notation is 1.2 times 10 to the minus 3 meter. If the area of the microchip is expressed in scientific notation as well as b times 10 to the a square meter, what is the value of a? So first of all, you need to look at this and try to figure out what you're talking about. So let's go visual. So they're talking about a square microchip. Okay, we're told we have side right, so normally the area is side squared. The length is 1.2 times 10 to the minus 3. All right, let me just make sure this is coming up on you guys' screens for a second. Yeah, there is. I seem to have about a minute delay, but in any event, let me take that back. Okay, so then the area is the side squared, right? So what they're asking us to do is somehow get the area and fill out a b and an a here. So the area in this case is going to be 1.2 times 10 to the minus 3. That whole thing is squared. Okay? Now the way I like to do this is this is 2 parts. This might be x and this might be y. So in this case, this is the same as x squared times y squared. Okay? Right? A times b, x times y. We can split this into 2 parts. So what we need to do is 1.2 squared, and if you know your squares, your perfect squares, you're going to get 1.44, right, for that. And then this is 10 to the minus 3. So you're going to have 10 to the minus 3 squared. So there's a couple of rules, or you could visualize it. It's 10 to the minus 3 times 10 to the minus 3. So if you don't know your exponent rules, you're screwed. Okay? If you get confused, you're screwed. If you read the problem wrong, you're screwed. Okay? So on the one hand, this is actually kind of a simple example. Let me compute this. So we're going to get 10 to the minus 6. So we get 1.44 times 10 to the minus 6. So the question is asking us, if this was in the form b times 10 to the minus a, it turns out b is 1.14, and the minus 6 is the a. I wrote minus a, it's just a. So it turns out that a is equal to minus 6. Okay? So what you don't want to make sure is that some of you are going to full limits. You're preparing with the SAT. You're going into AMC 12. You're doing all this stuff, and you don't need to. You don't want to go too low. You don't want to go back to grade 3, but you want to ensure that you have all your core fundamental stuff down. And by core fundamental stuff, I don't mean just the basics. They tell you for the grade 8 SHSAT, you need to know all of grade 7. And they also tell you for the grade 9 SHSAT that you need to know all of grade 8. So when I talk about your fundamentals, that's what I'm talking about. All of grade 8. And then obviously you need to know a little more than that. Okay? So the grade 9 SHSAT, you also need to know some grade 9 and 10 math as well. but not all grade 9 and 10 math. You don't need to go through the whole integrated algebra class. You don't need to go through the whole geometry class. You need to know certain things out of it, but not everything. Okay? So this is an example showing that they're just getting down to basic stuff here. That you still need to know every different part and every different area of it. Okay? So let me just give me 1 second to make sure we're still live. Yeah, we seem to be. And that you have your brain on right. Okay, so this problem, let me bring up the actual sheet. Do I have that? Yes, I did. What do I do with my pen? So what I like to do with any problem with an illustration is I don't like to read the words first. I just like to look at what's going on here. It tells me this is about a SOAP survey. It's broken down into those who use SOAP M and those who don't, and those who use SOAP L and those who don't. And it's orchestrated in such a way that we can find out who for instance, uses L and M and who doesn't use L and M, both in combinations. And there's various totals. So what I often like to do, not always, is add these numbers up here and add them across too. I don't know if I need to do that. Remember, you have to paste the test out. But in a lot of tests, you have to compute these numbers. Okay? So I'm not going to do that because it's not taking billion. If it was 100, 200, I would just write 3. But this may involve a little more cryptic numbers. So we want to try to make things easy. Don't compute something unless you really need to. All right? So I think I understand this. I ran some of the numbers. I'm just going to gloss at it and see that's 100 and something, there's 200 and something, there's 200 and something, that's 100 and something. Not a super big deal. So now I'm going to go back to the words. A company surveyed, well, you have it on your screen as well. A company surveyed, I don't have it on my screen, so a company surveyed 800 people about their use of SOAP L and SOAP M. So we already grokked that from looking at that. So what we're doing is we're going to use the words now to confirm our illustration. And by the way, a technique often used is to put words before the illustration, and then words after the illustration. Some kids read this, do that, that's cool. I like to start here. But some kids who start here, they forget to read this. Make sure you always read this. There's often valid information in here, even if it's just setting up the problem. Just read it. They're giving it to you, read it. It may or may not be important, okay? So a company surveyed 800 people about the use of SOAP L and SOAP M. And we know it includes their non-use of it too. Okay? The table shows the results. Cool, that's what we figured out. Based on the results of those who do not use SOAP L, X% use SOAP M. Let me just do something because I have something on my screen here that's in the way of the problem on my side of it. Okay, based on the results of those who do not use SOAP L. So in a lot of cases on the SHSAT, they use the negative. Instead of saying who's doing something, they try to do a table flip to make sure you do the opposite. So it just makes it a little more logically complicated, but make sure you do that. And by the way, they've bold-faced that word. So it's like tapping you on the shoulder. Yo, we said not. Okay? So in a lot of kids lose a point here. And it's not just a point, because it could be 5 points, it could be 20 points. The SHSAT has a roaming score based on the number of questions you get right. It's not just 1 point for each answer. The more questions you get right, the more points those subsequent correctly answered questions are. And it's not sequential. It's not question 1, question 2, question 3, question 5. It's based on the number that you correct out of the 57 questions with a max of 47, right? So based on those results of those who do not use SOAP L, X% will use SOAP M. What is the value of X expressed as a whole number? So they're looking at based on the results of those who do not use SOAP L. So they're not looking at this because these people use SOAP L, right? That's not being considered. based on those results of those who did not use SOAP-L. X% use M. So they're looking at this now, because that's what that says there. X% use SOAP-M. What is the value of X expressed in M? So in a lot of these questions, it means careful reading of what you're being told. So if we go back up to here, this was an important number. And that turns out to be the total of the 4 of these. So I talked about adding X and Y. There's also a Z that you often have to compute, which is the total of them all. So if I add up the 148, the 252, the 264, and then 136, I get the 800. So they gave us a bunch of givens. So a lot of the givens are in the table. They gave us a given at the start of the thing, a narrative 800. So a lot of you are going to go take 264 over 800. And that's not how to solve this. It's 264 out of those using this here. So what we're going to get is 264 plus 136. Right? 0, 1, 0, 1. We're going to get 400. So it's going to be 264 over 400. Now this is a grid-in problem. So a lot of you are going to do this. And then try to do all that division. And that'll work, but it's painful. It's painful. So what you need to do is, in a lot of the SHSAT examples, other tests are different, but generally speaking, this is true of other tests too. But certainly on the SHSAT's about concepts. The SHSAT is really not about ugly math. Okay? Let me say that again. The SHSAT is mostly about concepts. It's not about ugly math. All right? So what you want to do is, when your numbers are starting to get ugly, and this is about the extent of the ugliness, what you want to try to say, can I simplify something here? So some of you might notice these are both even, 264 over 400, and start dividing by 2. But there's even another mathematical proudness or fluidity here, which is that this is 400. So if we can get this to be 100, and if the top is divisible by 4, whatever we get up here, we get a percent. And that's what they're looking for. So if I can divide 400 by 4, I can divide 264 by 4. Right? So when you divide by 4, when you divide something by 4, you're going to divide it in half, and then half again. So sometimes you can even do this in your head. Even though on the SHSAT, I normally suggest students do not do mental math. Write down as much as possible. So anyway, you have 264. You divide that by 2. What are you going to get? 158? No, you're going to get 137. I'm putting my foot in my mouth, aren't I? I'm going to get 132. And if we divide it again, we get 66. And that turns out to be our answer, 66%. All right? So be careful with something like this. And if you want us to double check, you can certainly do that division. Or you could take the 66% now that you have it and multiply it back out by the 4 to make sure that you're getting the 264 back. Okay? In either case, that's what you're going to end up getting. All right? So that should be the answer for that. So now if we go to the next problem, and I'm gonna cap this at the third problem. So so as you can see, if we go back to this problem for a second though, the first problem wasn't too deep and too hard, but it could have had gotchas. Again, you're being required to remember what scientific notation was about, exactly how it works. And by the way, question number 1 was easy in the sense that at 1.2 gave you the 1.44 when you squared it. Okay? The decimal could have easily moved back and forth. So the main thing was just doing the 10 times the minus 3, by itself. So they didn't really care if you needed to move the decimal point in this example. So they could have made it more complicated by doing that. So just remember, there's 1,000 ways to do problems, and you could say, oh, I know how to do exponents. Oh, I know scientific notation, and yet enough kids are going to get this wrong, including smart kids, because you can lose points on silly errors. The same thing here. So many kids are going to pull out that 800 and not even think. And remember, there's nothing like test day, right? You could practice for years, and there's nothing like the day of the test. Your adrenaline's pumped, even if you're being a boss and you're calm and you're prepared and you're feeling good. There's still nothing like test day, and that's not the day you want to make the silly errors, because your brain is just ecstatic, because it's not even so much that you're nervous or scared. You could just be excited, and you want to use your adrenaline to your benefit. You don't want to use it to your disadvantage. All right. So this question number 2 wasn't too hard either, and yet it's there, and enough kids are going to get it wrong because it's so easy to mess up. It's so easy to mess up, and just the way they wrote it, because there's the not here, and just the way they use the X% use SOPM, you have to kind of think for a second. Whoa, wait a second. What exactly are they asking here? Okay. So the same kind of issue with question number 3. It's not that question number 3 is hard. It's just that you have to know how to do it, and you have to take it a piece at a time and do it calmly. So I see a table. I'm going to look at the illustration first. There's an X and a Y. So it may or may not involve coordinates. It's also an input-output table. I believe it's set up that way. It's not labeled, so we don't know exactly sure. But there's a bunch of stuff here. So you can almost conclude just by looking at that it's probably somehow involving something, involving a line or a function or something like that. We don't know yet. So what we're going to do is now go read the words. The value in the table, the values in the table represent a function. Okay, so that confirms it. What value of R down here, right, makes the function linear? So not only is it a function, it's a linear function. So we know right off the bat that probably we're going to need to use y equals mx plus b, because that's our standard formula involving stuff like that. So we notice they do give us x's and they do give us y's, but is that alone sufficient? So some of you can put the x's and y's here, brute force the m out, and then figure out what this should be. All right? So what you need to do is figure out what m is, which is the slope. And that's the same as the rise over the run, which is equal to the difference in the y's over the difference in the x's. And there's a couple of ways to do this, but it's normally said as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And I apologize for my handwriting here. It's atrocious, but if you follow along with what I'm doing. So what we need to do is take it and just go for it. So on the first one, we have 2 minus 4, right? No, I did that wrong. 2 minus 1 is the same as 2 plus 1. That's equal to 3. And the x is going to be minus 4 minus 1. So we're going to get minus 4 plus 1. And that's equal to minus 3. So if we put the 3 over the minus 3, we get m equals minus 1. So now if we can come back up here, we basically have y equals minus x plus b. Okay? And then what we need to do is fill those in and compute what the b would be. So if we take the first example, which is x being minus 4, we're going to get minus 4, and y is equal to 2. So 2 is equal to minus 4 plus b, which is the same as 2 equals 4 plus b, and therefore b equals 2. Okay? So that means we should have y equals minus x plus 2. If I did that correctly. Nope, we have 4 here, so it should be minus 2. So we get minus x minus 2, and let's just plug the first one in. So we get 2 equals minus 4 minus 2. And 2 equals 4 minus 2, and 2 equals 2. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go and do the same thing with the value that they gave us there. So we have y equals minus x minus 2. And for the last, with the 3 and the r, right? R is the y equals, x is 3. So we get r equals minus 5. And that turns out to be our answer. All right? So some of these can get wishy-washy. I just made a mistake here myself. And I'll continue on with some more examples of these. For now, I'm just going to leave it to that. And if anybody needs any other help, you can certainly contact me. Please subscribe, because I'll do a lot of these. I encourage you to do it. I already have a couple hundred of these, including other grade 9 ones, including ones that are labeled similarly to this, the title of this stream, and other ones where it's kind of hidden inside of a larger discussion about more involved math stuff, including grade 9 ELA and other things like that as well. You can email me, and obviously please like the video, and I will be doing more of these, as I said earlier. Peace out, everybody. Yeah, it's not letting me leave.